Napoleon Bonaparte, the mind that tried to own the world. Before we begin, forget the paintings. Forget the hand-in-the-coat pose. Forget the short jokes. Forget the myth. Because the real story of Napoleon Bonaparte doesn't begin with power. It begins with humiliation. Before he was Emperor of France, before the French Revolution turned Europe upside down, before Waterloo, before Exile, he was a foreign boy in a French military school who could barely speak the language. And the question that shaped his entire life was this: what does a child do when he feels small in a room full of giants? Some shrink, some disappear. Napoleon decided to conquer the room, and eventually, the continent. Stay with this story, because the same insecurity that built his empire also destroyed it. Napoleon Bonaparte was born in 1769 on the island of Corsica. Corsica had just been taken over by France. His family was technically noble, but barely. They had pride, not power. Napoleon grew up surrounded by stories of resistance. His father had supported Corsican independence. His mother, Letizia, was disciplined, strict, emotionally strong. Napoleon learned two early lessons: power shifts, and survival requires strategy. At age 9, he was sent to mainland France for military school. He spoke French with a Corsican accent. He was mocked. He was isolated. He read obsessively instead of socializing. He studied history, especially ancient generals: Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar. He wasn't dreaming of being rich. He was studying how power works. That distinction matters, because Napoleon did not crave luxury. He craved control. As a teenager, Napoleon was not charismatic. He was quiet, intense, calculating. He once wrote that he felt like an outsider everywhere. And here's the psychological pivot. When someone feels excluded long enough, they either break or they decide to build a world where they are never excluded again. Napoleon chose the second option. Then came the French Revolution. In 1789, France exploded. The monarchy fell. The king was executed. Chaos consumed the country. For most people, the French Revolution meant instability. For Napoleon Bonaparte, it meant opportunity. Revolutions destroy hierarchies. And when hierarchies collapse, new ladders appear. Napoleon climbed fast. By his mid-20s, he was already a general. Young, ambitious, unapologetically strategic. He didn't win battles through brute strength. He won through speed, positioning, and psychological warfare. He understood something critical. Armies don't just fight with weapons. They fight with belief. Napoleon gave his soldiers belief. He stood in front of them and said, "You are hungry and poorly clothed. I will lead you into the most fertile plains in the world." And somehow, they followed him. Here's the first big question. Was Napoleon Bonaparte a military genius, or was he simply better at convincing men to risk everything? Because charisma can look like brilliance, and belief can look like destiny. The Italian campaign made him famous. He defeated larger armies through rapid maneuvers. He rewrote battlefield strategy. Europe began whispering his name: Napoleon Bonaparte. But fame was not enough. He didn't want to be admired. He wanted to be indispensable. Then came Egypt. Napoleon invaded Egypt not just for military gain, but for symbolism. He brought scientists, scholars, artists. He wanted to be seen not only as a conqueror, but as a visionary. But the Egyptian campaign faltered. And here's where his genius shows. Instead of collapsing politically, he returned to France and controlled the narrative. He framed defeat as discovery. He reframed reality. That skill would define his rise. By 1799, France was exhausted. Political instability, economic struggle, fear of collapse. Napoleon seized power in a coup. He did not declare himself king. He declared himself first consul. Subtle, strategic. Then in 1804, he crowned himself Emperor of France, not crowned by a pope. He took the crown and placed it on his own head. Symbolism matters. He was telling the world, power does not descend, power is taken. Napoleon Bonaparte restructured France. He created the Napoleonic Code, a legal system still influential today. He reformed education, stabilized finances, strengthened infrastructure. This is important. Napoleon was not just a conqueror. He was an architect of systems. But systems require expansion, and expansion requires war. Europe united against him. Britain, Austria, Russia, Prussia. Coalition after coalition. Napoleon defeated them again and again. At his peak, he controlled most of continental Europe. He redrew the map. Kings fell. Borders shifted. The boy mocked for his accent now dictated the future of nations. So here's the question. When does ambition become addiction? Because conquest is intoxicating. And Napoleon began to believe he was unstoppable. Then came Russia. 1812. Napoleon invaded with over 600,000 soldiers. It was one of the largest armies Europe had ever seen. He expected a decisive victory. Instead, the Russians retreated, burning cities behind them. Napoleon entered Moscow, but there was no surrender. Winter arrived. Cold, starvation, disease. The army that marched in with 600,000 returned with barely a fraction. This was not just a military defeat, it was psychological collapse. The myth of invincibility shattered, and once belief breaks, empires follow. Coalitions rose again. Napoleon was defeated and exiled to Elba, a small island. From Emperor of France to ruler of nothing significant. For most men, that would be the end. Napoleon escaped. He returned to France, and something extraordinary happened. The army sent to arrest him joined him instead. He stood before them and said, "If any among you would kill his emperor, here I am." No one fired. He marched back to Paris, power regained without blood. But this final act would not last. Waterloo, 1815. Napoleon Bonaparte faced the Duke of Wellington. The battle was brutal. The outcome decisive. Napoleon lost. This time there would be no return. He was exiled to St. Helena, a remote island in the Atlantic, far from Europe, far from power. He would die there in 1821. Here's the final twist. Napoleon may have lost his empire, but he won something else. Memory. He dictated memoirs in exile. He shaped how history would remember him. He turned himself into legend. Even defeat became part of the myth, and that may have been his greatest victory. So what was Napoleon Bonaparte? A tyrant? A reformer? A military genius? A power addict? Or a boy who refused to feel small ever again? The empire fell. The legend didn't. And that's why we still speak his name. If this story made you rethink Napoleon Bonaparte, subscribe. Because history isn't built by perfect men. It's built by men who refuse to stay small.